Hello, I'm Susan Patricelli-Regan, and I am your host for Connecticut Valley Views. Our program focus today is the Connecticut and the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, otherwise known as Connecticut's Nfl Cio. The Connecticut Nfl Cio is a federation of hundreds of local unions representing more than 220,000 members in the private sector, public sector, and building trades. To bring you up to date on the Nfl Cio's status, my guests today are Sal Luciano. He is the current president of the Connecticut Nfl Cio. It's a pleasure to see you again, Sal.
Pleasure to be here.
Delighted. And my other guests are Ed Hawthorne. He is the anticipated upcoming president of the Connecticut Nfl Cio. And Shelley Davis, who is also the anticipated new executive VP of the Connecticut Nfl Cio. What a pleasure to see you two.
Yes,
It's great. It's very exciting, I think, transition period. So, Sal, please give our viewers, short background about the Nfl Cio, where you are,
Sure.
what a great job, your members have been doing, particularly during these past 2 years.
Yeah, the AFL started as really a reaction to some of the child labor, the fact that children were working in coal mines and the need for workers that would work 60 hours a week and still not be able to put food on the table. And so it started out, the American Federation of Labor started out mostly with skilled craftsmen. And then they felt the need to join with the Congress of Industrial Organization, people like A. Philip Randolph, who did such a marvelous job, and they merged. And that's why you see the white hand shaking the darker hand.
Yes.
That's to essentially, that's the emblem of the AFL Cio, and that's the brief history. Of course, the pandemic highlighted a couple of things that was already wrong with society. What you saw was, both in terms of the impact, you saw early on most of the people who got COVID were African American, Latinx people who were on the front line, and it really gave a different idea of what essential was.
Yes.
When we think of essential, we think of doctors and nurses,
yes.
policemen.
Right.
All of a sudden, they were the fast food workers.
They were really the frontliners.
Right.
Yeah.
The fast food workers, the
Right.
bus drivers, people that
Make the train run.
Exactly. And so there was that piece of it, that they were doing the frontline work mostly because they had to, in order to put food on the table. They lived paycheck to paycheck. And and also the impact of the illness. They were the majority of the heroes that were showing up, bus drivers to get the doctors and nurses and other people to work, the people who were stocking shelves. And the impact was felt mostly on women, mostly on minority women who wanted to work, but now with the schools closed, had no
What
child
do you do
care.
with the children?
So the impact was hardest on women and hardest on African American and Latinx women. And in the meantime, with all of this suffering that was going on, the wealthy made trillions of dollars over this period, the Jeff Bezos of the world, et cetera.
Right.
And so it really...
Well, they can stay removed from the whole thing. They don't have to actually show up.
Exactly. Exactly right. And so it made workers, I think, feel a little bit more confident. This is Striketober. There's several strikes in Connecticut. CWA just authorized the strike vote, 97%.
Wow.
97% is pretty amazing.
I guess.
And Sunrise Convalescent Homes in Connecticut. But across the country, John Deere, Kellogg, workers are saying, I am not going to give my life working 40, 50 hours a week and then struggle to keep a roof over my head.
Right.
We wonder, Hartford has a median income of about $18,000. And then we wonder why
these... Is that really the median?
Yeah.
18,000.
So the median, as you know, means half the people live below that. So you've made 50% of the people in Hartford. It's more than 50, but you put so much stress on those people. These are working people. These are people working 40 hours a week. And we keep saying God didn't do this, and so the AFL's mission is to try to raise those wages to make people be able to achieve happiness. It doesn't take much. It just takes not having to worry about feeding your kids and keeping a roof over your head.
Of course.
And all the pushback has been, we'll lose jobs if we raise the minimum wage. Well, we have a couple of Nobel winners this month,
Yeah.
just this month,
Yeah.
that proves that's not the case.
Okay.
That immigrants don't take white people's jobs or American jobs. And so we're really excited to be able to move this forward. We're excited that we have the highest approval rating that we've had in decades, because people realize that the system is rigged and they're trying to do something about it.
Yes.
You know?
Well, see, standing up for what you believe in is so important. If you don't and you sit back and you know you should be saying something, there's an awful lot of fear going around these days. And fear is a controlling factor.
Exactly. But we saw, the success of UFCW with Stop and Shop, with people bringing donuts and coffee
Yes.
and trying to support
Right,
them.
right.
And we saw it at Dollar General yesterday in Barkhamsted, where the Dollar General workers are trying to unionize and
Yes.
trying to get better wages and working conditions.
Yes. Well, it's, one voice, one page, one for all and all for one. All right, so now during these mandates that are going on currently with the shots and so forth, how has that impacted your workers? I mean, how are they responding to that mandate?
I think initially things were slow. When you have a history of African American people knowing things like the Tuskegee Airmen and,
Yes,
and Helen
yes.
and Helen Lax and,
Right.
and all of those things, they are skeptical, and I think they have a right to be skeptical. But they weren't no-vaxxers. They were just, let's see what
Can I
happens
choose?
with other people.
Yeah,
And so I think almost all of them have come around. There are a few people, because the internet is so crazy.
Yes.
I've heard people say, I don't want dead baby in me.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to become
Right.
infertile. None of
Sure.
which is, none of which is true. But for those people who like to visit those websites, they truly believe it.
Well, there's always going to be an exception,
Right.
no matter what. And of course, numbers of how many people have died and so forth have gotten confused with actually what did they really die of. They may have had a heart problem to begin with. So I think there is much confusion, and I think what's important is that we don't want the media construing stories and wrapping them around the way they want them to
That's
go.
right.
The news media needs to get back to facts.
Exactly.
And never mind who's on what side of the aisle. Can
Right.
we just get the information out correctly to people and then let them make their decisions?
Yeah,
for
it shouldn't.
themselves?
Science should not be politicized.
No, you need to deal with the facts. Well, now, Shelley, I'd like to know a little bit more about your background, how you got to this spot, how you've decided to take on this new opportunity, this new challenge. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for the question. I started in 1991. I was a paraeducator in the Hartford Public Schools, where I still currently am. And I got involved in the union. I come from a union background. My parents were in the union. My grandfather was a plumber, so I grew up with that.
A great trade skill.
Yes, I grew up with that. I became a building rep, then I became the first vice president of the parish union, then I got involved with the labor union and
Yeah.
Nfl Cio and AFT, and became divisional vice, and now here I am.
Now, as far as your background, I know you said you're inspired by, the background that you have, but early on in your life, what was a personal interest? So we know a little bit
Actually,
more about you, the person.
I was a
You like
dancer.
the garden?
I was a dancer.
You were a dancer, okay. Well, that's very interesting. Did you hope to become a professional dancer?
Well, I did, and I think that's when I had one of my first experiences. The teacher had told me there would never be a Negro ballerina, and so I stopped dancing.
Oh.
I didn't go home and tell my
naysayer.
parents. And so when we did
Right.
get the first Negro ballerina, a black American ballerina, I sat and cried because it meant the world to me.
Right.
That you can't let people take away your dreams. And so it's another reason why I sit here.
See, we each have our American dream as individuals. And then what happens is that personal dream, and I found myself that after having children, it moved away from me personally to caring about what's going on in the world and wanting to take on something to change it.
Absolutely.
Isn't that right? That's how you get
Absolutely.
to the bigger picture, because you realize once you have children that your world is much greater than yourself. And you have how many children?
3.
You have
3 grown adults.
And-
Yes.
And
That have been my inspiration.
yeah, well, that's wonderful. So Ed, tell us a little bit of background, please.
So I'm at Hawthorne. I'm currently the president of the Western Connecticut Area Labor Federation. It's essentially the old CLCs, or Central Labor Councils.
Okay.
There's 4 of them together. So Shelley's Eastern, I'm Western currently, so we already kind of work together in some capacity to make sure the AFL for municipal elections and community organizing is out there. But I was born and raised in Connecticut. I'm from Wolcott, still live in Wolcott with my wife and my 2 daughters who are 5 and 8. And yeah, I'm an attorney in 2 states. I'm licensed practice law in New York as well as Connecticut.
It's always a great thing to have.
Yeah, every 2 years the bill comes from, I've never actually practiced in New York, but every 2 years the bill comes and my wife looks at me and says, you know, you're going to pay it, right? And I go, oh, I don't know. And she goes, you want to take that test again? I go, absolutely not. She goes, pay it. So that's a good $500-600 every 2 years, but it's well worth it. The bar exam is an absolute, actually, is a monster. When I studied for the bar, I took both of them at the same time. And I think I lost 20 pounds studying for it in one summer because I just didn't move and just read. And that's kind of how I approach things. When I see something I want, I just kind of go after it. I think it has a little bit to do with my football background. I played football for 14 years.
What position did you play?
I was middle linebacker.
Okay.
I played for Holy Cross High School in Waterbury, went on to play at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, and then after that I went to law school up in Buffalo. So big Buffalo Bills fan, go Bills.
You know, I often encourage women to get their law degrees because it's one way to protect themselves personally.
Absolutely. Over
professionally.
50% of my class was female. So.
Yeah. And one lawyer I spoke to said, doesn't matter where you get your law degree, just get it.
That's it. The reason I went to Buffalo was I had an off-campus apartment at Marist, and I was able to claim in-state residency. It was actually cheaper than UConn, believe it or not. I think it was $12,000 a year. So compared to either going to UConn or even going to Quinnipiac, it was much cheaper. And if you know what the Midwest is like, I had a nice apartment for $900 a month, heat included, garage, cable, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was a different experience living up there, but it was a great experience. It's something that I really look back on with, you know, great pride that I was able to do that.
Did anybody inspire you and your family when you were younger to get into law, or where did you get your spark of inspiration, your desire to serve, I guess?
I'd have to say in high school. So I've known my wife since high school. We didn't get together till college, but we were both peer ministers at Holy Cross. Oh. And it really was the giving back to the community and seeing people struggle and seeing people, you know, just want a better life. Yes. And, you know, I come from a union background. Actually, when I went to Marist, I received the Arthur E. Coya Scholarship. It was a few $1,000s a year from the laborers from Liona. Okay. So, you know, I've been aware of unions. I've been aware of the great power that unions have because when people band together, we are stronger. We do union orientations for my local. I'm currently at the Department of Labor. I've been there for the past 10 years. And when we do our new hire orientations, we actually take pencils and we show like the power of one, you can break the pencil. Okay. Put a bunch of pencils together, you can't break the pencil. And that's the way we introduce people to unionization is the power together, you can achieve great things. Yeah. And it's just really, fighting for working people is my dream job. And that's why when I heard Sal was retiring for, how many times now? Well, when Sal was retiring again, you know, I really wanted to go after it. Yes. And, you know, it's something that I believe in, and I believe fighting for working people. And especially for my generation, being, I call myself an elder millennial, I say I can still talk to you about dial-up, but at 36 years old, when I came out of law school in 2009, there wasn't many jobs. So I ended up working at the courthouse for a year, and then the choices were foreclosure mediation or unemployment compensation. I've been doing unemployment compensation for the past 10 years. So we hear a lot of stories of people struggling there as well. So it's, you know, it's a different experience. And I think I look at things from a little bit of a different angle generationally, because my generation is the first generation that is, well, projected to be worse off than our parents. And people in my generation are really looking for hope. They call us lazy, whatever it may be.
For you, your children.
Absolutely, my children.
And their children's children.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact of the matter is that anyone that works for 40 hours a week should be able to put food on the table, should be able to take a family vacation every year and not have to worry, and that's not the world we live in. And, you know, the numbers show that with the decline in unionization over the years, you know, people have become worse off. So, to me, the answer to the American dream is getting that union card and fighting for a better life.
Well, I think and I'm going to speak rather candidly about this, and I'm going to come back to you, Sal. I think that many times, I mean, initially the union was because they were on the defense, and that's why the unions, as you said, formed this. But today, lots of times you say the word unions, and it's not looked at very happily. It's confrontational, and you know what they want, and isn't that right? Isn't that right?
It's a little bit right, but what they want is what everybody wants. They want to be able to feed their children. They want to be able to not have to worry about having a roof over their head, and they'd like to retire with some dignity. And I think I think we can do that. The AFL has this old saying. The problem isn't that we can't feed the poor. The problem is that the rich are never satisfied.
Yes.
And so, they say there's no money for education. They say there's no, and yet the tax system is inverted.
Yes.
The people who are paying the lion's share of the taxes are the same people who are struggling to put a roof over their head and food on the table.
Right, right. Well, pretty soon, I think parents, if they're not going to be happy with what's happening in their schools because the DOJ, they're going to unionize themselves. There's going to be a class action suit or something, I don't know. But anyway, all right, so you had on March 24th, 2021, there was an HB 6654, an act establishing a child tax credit against personal income, and there was HB 6443, an act concerning revenue items to implement the governor's budget. How did that all work out?
It didn't. The governor has steadfastly protected the wealthy people in the state, which is sad because they're the ones, a famous bank robber was asked why he robbed banks, and he said, well, that's because that's where the money is. And while people are struggling, and for them to pay the lion's share of the taxes, while you have multimillionaires and billionaires who made money during the pandemic, while other people were struggling, while the bus driver didn't have the protective equipment, neither did the school personnel, neither did
they actually short-sheeted a lot of people.
Yes, and then they had the deputy commissioner of the Department of Health saying that people in the nursing homes wanted to wear the plastic trash bags as PPE, which was totally ridiculous. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop. We're going to continue to push. We think that we cannot have a civil society. We wonder why there's violence. We wonder why there's mental health problems. With these families being so stressed, financially, it doesn't have to be that way. It seems like every time we take a step forward, we take a step back. If they had
as long as it's not 3 steps back.
Yeah. When they started minimum wage, if they had just indexed that to the consumer price index, it'd be like $27 an hour now, which is much over the $15 and almost a sustainable wage.
Right.
And so they fixed that, but then they didn't connect it to
I see it as keeping up with cost of living.
Yes,
I mean, it's
exactly.
much like Social Security. I think there's going to be something like a 5 or 6% increase in Social Security.
Exactly right. They said over 5.
So I think what needs to be done is need consideration for that, the cost of living. Now, somewhere it's going to fall on someone's shoulders. If the pay is going to go up, then theoretically the price of whatever that person is selling, a restaurant selling sandwiches, has got to charge more to the consumer.
That's true.
Somewhere.
That is true. But, in San Francisco, the restaurant owners, when they were mandated to provide health insurance for the servers, they actually put out a sheet of paper saying the prices went up 15% because we were forced to provide health insurance to our servers.
Yes.
And the customers were like, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they reacted in a humane way. And the other thing is, it isn't a zero-sum game. When you give people money to spend, they buy more pizzas, they get more haircuts.
No, that's quite true.
And that revs up the economy. We've seen that just through the $600 additional checks for the unemployed. Right? We've seen the economy doing okay. So we believe what John F. Kennedy said, a rising tide lifts all boats. And now we have a couple of Nobel Prize winners who have proved that scientifically.
Well, let's just, for my viewers, because we're going to have viewers who are going to be on both sides, everybody's got their thoughts.
Sure.
So when we say the wealthy people, okay, but, it isn't tied to one party.
No.
I mean, the wealthy party, you know, on
No.
both sides of the aisle.
I
you know?
agree.
So we need to, you know, kind of pass the, not
No, I-
blame, but, you know.
We will endorse anybody who wants to fight for working people, be they Republican, Independent, Democrat, you know, the national, that's part of the problem, right? I think the RNC is the corporate donations are like 88%, and for the Democrats, it's 84%. There's almost no difference, you know, and Citizens United, the Supreme Court, made it so that they decided that money is speech, that corporations
Yes.
are people.
Yes.
So billionaires have a lot more speech than working people.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to band together.
Well, I think the majority of people living in Connecticut, all right, we're a Constitution state. And they've always been work hard type people, you know, the land of steady habits and all of that stuff. The major people who are remaining here because the wealthy, if they don't like what's going on here, they don't like the school system, they don't like what's happening to their business or whatever, they just haul up and go to wherever, Texas or Florida or whatever. But those other folks don't have the money to do that. So we're going to end up with the hard-working people of the state, and that's who they're going to have to try. I mean, in other words, that's where the money and the revenue and the economy is going to revolve
I understand that, but
Yeah.
I will posit to you that if you go to Greenwich, you're not going to see lots of unoccupied buildings. You know, they're
Lots of
there.
mansions.
They're there because it's cheap. It's cheaper than
Yes.
Westchester
Yes.
in terms of taxes.
Yes.
And it's next to New York City, and there's still many billionaires in New York City, and they're highly taxed. Why are they there? World-class restaurants, world-class education, world-class entertainment.
Right, right. But your union workers, they are physically putting in the time where you said there are other people who can work remotely and so forth, and that becomes a segment unto itself. Well, anyway, let's get back here. Shelley, anticipating you as the first black executive VP, and a woman, of course, what is your perspective on being instrumental in changing things, improving things? What's your vision?
First, my vision is that it's an honor and it's a humble place to be, to represent people that have been underrepresented, for people that have been in the room and their voices weren't heard, for people that weren't able to be in the room at all, and those that haven't been seen. With that being said, and being a woman as well, it's a whole different issue that women still aren't paid what they should be paid. It says all men are created equal. Didn't say anything about women, especially women of color.
Sometimes the best man for the job is a woman.
Right. So for me, it's a privilege to do this, but I want it to be understood that I'm going to be here for all people. What I hope I bring to the table is the experience of people that are black, people of color, people that have not been represented, and for them to understand that I do understand a lot of struggles that my white brothers and sisters don't know.
What is the greatest struggle? What has been the greatest offense against, let's call it, your culture, your race? What do you feel the most?
Just being black in America, being black while driving home, being black while it's dark at night, anything that happens where you're automatically assumed a suspect rather than a victim in a lot of cases.
How did that, why has that, when they've done well, when they accomplish things, when they're well-spoken, when they've risen high in sports and political, why is it that they still are not taken seriously? Why?
That is something that's a learned behavior. It's something that's deep woven into the system. It's a belief that people have. Not too sure where or why it still exists in 2021, but fact is it's here. And so it's going to take all of us to help each other, to listen to each other, to understand that we all want the same things, right? It shouldn't be about the color of our skin. I think that goes back to different, higher era where if you can keep us all fighting and we all divided based on whether it's color, religion, classism, then we don't win. That 1% continues to win. And I've always wondered, when you have the 99%ers, us, the working people, and the 1%ers, how does the scale end up? We're not on top for anything. And so going back to working together and just changing that culture.
You need a marketing campaign that highlights the accomplishments in history of the black culture and people, and the accomplishments of what they have done, and having that be, you know, highlighted. I think if you do that, then, you know, you're going to start a different profile, and I think that's what needs to be done. All right, so Ed, going forward, your objectives and things that you hope to accomplish.
So going forward, Shelley and I have actually already started this. We have this thing from the Eastern and thank you, from the Eastern and Western area labor federations. We've already started training the next generation and kind of trying to lift up underrepresented populations within the labor movement itself. We call it the Labor Leadership Academy. So we're targeting public, private sector, building trades, women, people of color, younger folks, and we're actually going to announce our first class at the convention next week. And we have, I believe, 20 or 21 applicants that will be trained by 4 very seasoned veterans of the labor movement. And we're going to put them through a 10-month course varying between classroom work and community-based work, implant them into our labor chapters, and run community-based operations, because our belief is that the community, well, we always say labor is your neighbor. Connecticut is one of the most highly unionized places in the country, the other of which I actually went to law school in Buffalo. So about, you know, around 15–20% of voters are union members in the state of Connecticut. So we really want to get back to the community and teach about what we are all about and how we benefit the community. I mean, some people think that union is a drain on the economy, and we believe it's the exact opposite. We are actually fighting for everyone. So when you said earlier that you know, people look at unions in almost a bad light, I would pose on to you, it's like, how many union members fought for paid family leave?
If we don't talk about it, Ed, we can't address it, we can't solve it. So, you know, that's why I bring up the subject. I just want to say that, you know, we're coming to the end of our interview, but I think it's been very enlightening, and particularly during this time when we're doing a transition, Sal, you being such a great leader for so long, and we have 2 wonderful new people who are going to add a lot to this. So I want to give the website so that the viewers can follow through as to what's going on. It is ctaflcio.org. And any other contact information you'd like to give, if you could probably email through that, ask questions. Sure. And after the transition next week and the convention, I'm sure it'll be a very exciting time. So I want to thank you again for being my guest today, and appreciate your commentary. And for all of you out there, please see all of our shows on ConnecticutValleyViews.com. This is Susan Patricelli Regan, thanking you for spending time with us today.